It was a few years ago, maybe 5 or 6 years ago this month, that Diane and I were at the Lifeline Family Center dinner, and I think we were sitting at a table that had been sponsored by Fred Atkins, and I was sitting next to a man I did not know who was a leader in a local denominational church, and we were having a nice conversation all the way through dinners. They brought the scrumptious meal out and courses, as happens at banquets, and then they brought out the dessert just before the speaker was to get up and speak to us. And the man said, "I'll pass on the dessert. I'm giving up desserts for Lent, and I don't want to be tempted. I don't want it sitting here, and I don't want to be tempted." So that led to a little discussion between he and I couldn't help but think how for many years people who follow a liturgical schedule give up something for Lent as a spiritual discipline. They usually give up something like desserts or sweets or chocolate or coffee or tea or ice cream. Some who are less disciplined will dramatically announce that as a joke they are giving up something that's out of season and not available, like watermelon or strawberries, or sometimes they will say they're giving up something they can't stand anyway, like spinach or Brussels sprouts. My understanding is that Nate Drake gave up eating Cisco out of a can, although I would have given about a week's salary to be there and see that. Others with tongue firmly planted in cheek say they're giving up something they can't do anyway, like running a 4-minute mile or going space travel. The Church of Christ has historically not practiced Lent or followed any sort of liturgical schedule that accompanies it. In case you're not aware, Lent is a period of fasting or moderation and self-denial, traditionally observed by Catholics. It began there. In some Protestant denominations, last week it began with Ash Wednesday, and it ends with Easter Sunday, and the length of the Lenten fast was established in the 4th century as 46 days. It's actually 40 days, not counting the 6 Sundays. And during Lent, participants eat sparingly or give up a particular food or habit or something in their lifestyle. It's not uncommon at all for people to give up smoking during Lent or to swear off watching television or eating candy or telling lies. It's really a time of self-discipline for 6 weeks. It began as a way for Catholics to remind themselves of the value of repentance. The austerity of the Lenten season for 6 weeks was seen as similar to how people in the Old Testament fasted and repented in sackcloth. It was observed, as I said, originally by Catholics, and then some Lutherans picked it up, and some Anglicans, and some Greek Orthodox, and there are also some versions of Methodist and Presbyterians who practice it as well. Of course, the argument against it, and the reason that churches of Christ who are a part of the Restoration movement and who are non-denominational have never actually practiced it or emphasized it, is it is an extra-biblical teaching, and it is an extra-biblical thought that is not mentioned directly in Scripture. But the idea behind it of repenting of sin is something we should do every day of the year. Laying aside something, not just for 46 days, but something that's either not good for us physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually, is actually a very good idea. And if an individual Christian wants to observe Lent, he's free to do so, as long as he doesn't bind it on the others. The key, though, is to focus on repenting of sin and consecration and devotion to God. Lent certainly should never be a time of boasting of one's sacrifice or trying to enforce your belief or your practice upon somebody else. So it's caused me to think a lot about it since I had that discussion with that man that night, and then this past Wednesday, since I saw so many people. I was in the community most of the day Wednesday, and I saw so many people with the ash on their forehead. It's caused me to think a lot about just what have I ever intentionally and thoughtfully given up for God. What have you? And I've been thinking about this from another perspective. If we're going to give up something, instead of choosing something good like dessert, why don't we choose something bad? If we're going to give up something as a spiritual discipline, then why don't we pick out something we really need to get out of our lives permanently? Why not give up something bad? And so the discussion continued around the table that night at the Lifeline banquet, and one lady said, I've decided I'm going to give, she was not one who practiced Lent normally either, but she said, I've decided I like the concept, I like the idea, I'm going to give up being unhappy for Lent this year, because she said, I spend much of my life miserable and unhappy. And she said, I'm going to take this concept and use it as a spiritual concept in my own life. And I thought, that's a pretty good idea. If we're going to give up something as a spiritual discipline, why not pick something out that is already a thorn in our flesh? It's really a very biblical idea, isn't it? Jesus said to the disciples, if any one of you wants to be my follower, you must, what are the next two words? Give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. And he says it to us. Deny yourselves, take up your cross, follow me. We could say it this way in modern vernacular. Get rid of those things in your life that prevent you from walking where Jesus would lead you. Get rid of those things in your life that are not Christ-like. And then Jesus himself said it much more graphically in the Sermon on the Mount. Jesus said, so if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Gouge it out. Cut it off. Throw it away? Did Jesus really say that? Is this the kind, loving, gentle, and mild Jesus that we so often sing about? Is this the personable Jesus who took little children into his arms and blessed them? Is this the sensitive Jesus who loved the birds of the air and the flowers of the field? Is this the compassionate Jesus who touched the man with the withered hand and made him whole again? What are we to make of these words we just read? These words sound so harsh, so stark, so brutal. If your right hand offends you, cut it off. If your eye is causing you to sin, gouge it out. In either instance, throw it away. There must be some truth here that is tremendously important to prompt Jesus to speak so boldly, so strongly, so unflinchingly. Obviously, Jesus is speaking symbolically here. He's not talking about acts involving knives and gouges. He means that anything that is destructive, anything that threatens to destroy us, anything that seduces us to sin should be radically and ruthlessly cut out of our lives. Any part that threatens the existence of the whole must be eliminated before it contaminates the whole and destroys. Maybe you get rid of the eye, the rest of the body is okay, including the other eye. Maybe you get rid of one hand, the rest of the body is okay, including the other hand. If you're smoking and it's destroying your lungs, quit smoking. If you're drinking to excess and you're becoming an alcoholic, quit drinking. If you're gambling and losing all your food money at the track or online, quit gambling. Whatever you're doing that is tainting and destroying your life, cut it off, quit it, and give it up before it does you in. Even if it's not something as drastic as one of those things, even if it's like the woman at the table said, I am going to give up being unhappy for the next 46 days. I am going to do everything I possibly can to remind myself that I have joy in the Lord and I'm not going to be unhappy during this period. It sounds harsh and it sounds startling, but the truth is, operating on this cut it off, give it up, get rid of it is a principle we follow a lot of the time. Ask any doctor here in the room. We have about a half a dozen of them in here today. Ask any doctor if you have an appendix that's about to rupture and spread its poison to other parts of the body, the doctor will not hesitate to cut it out immediately. Immediately. If skin cancer appears on your finger and threatens to get in your bloodstream and spread to other parts of your body, the doctor will say, let's biopsy that skin cancer and get that off right now before it grows and becomes a bigger problem. Ask any dentist, any athlete, or any singer, and they will tell you there are certain things you have to give up before you can get back in doing your best. And nowhere is this principle truer than in the spiritual realm where it is introduced to us by Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount. This principle of gouge it out, cut it off, throw it away, get rid of it. Because there are certain acts, certain attitudes, certain habits, certain sins that will contaminate us, infect us, and poison literally our souls. And the only way we can be spiritually well, spiritually fit, and spiritually whole is to do just this. Gouge it out, cut it off, throw it away. Nothing less than radical surgery will do. Now be honest with yourself right now and be honest with God. What is it in your life right now that you could gouge it out or cut it off or throw it away and you'd be closer to God? You might even be closer to your family or to the family of God. What is it that you could practice this that would make you better? I think there are lots of things, but I'm going to speak to us collectively rather than individually in just the next few moments. This will not be lengthy, it will not be profound. But I thought in my own mind, what are some things that all of us need to hear about, that we need to gouge out, cut off, throw away in the current society in which we are living? Things that are so prevalent in the world around us that they get to us too. And they infect us too if we're not careful and if we're not conscious about the need to get rid of them. So I'm going to give you two. I'm sure you will think of others. I hope you will not only think of others, but you'll pick something else and practice it as your own personal Lent for the next few weeks. The first one, and I've picked both of these because they are so prevalent today in our society. Never in my lifetime, anyway, have I seen people so divided, so angry, so bitter, so unhappy, so unwilling to listen to one another, so separated from one another, sometimes separated from their own family members, separated from their own God, separated from God's family. So let's talk for a moment about bitterness. Is there some bitterness in your life right now? If so, you better give it up because it will poison your soul. Those are not my words. Those, my friends, are God's words. Is there a grudge? Is there a grievance? Is there a smoldering hatred? Is there a broken relationship that is tainting your life right now? Hebrews 12:15 says, "Look after each other so that none of you fails to receive the grace of God. Watch out that no poisonous root of bitterness grows up to trouble you, corrupting many." That's the Holy Spirit of God saying that. That bitterness is a poisonous root that if you don't gouge it out, cut it off, and throw it away, will trouble you and corrupt you. Some of you remember the award-winning movie Rain Man of a few years ago. It's a story of a young man named Charlie Babbitt who became estranged from his father because of a confrontation that happened when Charlie was just 16 years old. Charlie brought home a good report card and he wanted desperately to take some of his buddies for a victory ride in his dad's prized Chevrolet and convertible, and his dad said no. When his dad left the house, Charlie took it anyway, picked up his friends, went on a joyride, and his father had him arrested and had his buddies arrested for stealing the car. The parents of the other boys went immediately and bailed them out, but Charlie's dad left him in jail for 2 days. I couldn't help when I thought about it, but think about one of my sons. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you, it was the oldest one. I was walking by his room one night, and he was on the phone with a friend of his that I will not identify the friend, but the friend had gotten in some trouble and said, "I'm afraid I'll go to jail." And I heard my oldest son, he was about 16, 17, or 18 at the time. He was somewhere in that age group. I heard my oldest son say, I don't ever want to go to jail. I guarantee you my dad would leave me there. I would have been Charlie Babbitt's dad. He thought, which is what I wanted him to think. Now, would I have done that? Absolutely. No. I don't think I would have. But he thought that. But Charlie was furious. When he got out of jail, he was so angry and so hurt and so hostile that he ran away from home and he completely separated himself from his father. His father later tried to contact him, but Charlie, still bitter, refused to respond. They were estranged for the rest of Mr. Babbitt's life. And finally, when Mr. Babbitt died, he left the convertible, the car that had caused the estrangement, to Charlie. And that's all he left him, just the car. He left the remainder of his estate, over $3 million, to Charlie's autistic brother named Raymond, a brother that, by the way, Charlie didn't even know he had. And so if you've seen the movie, you know the story continues to unfold, and Charlie is angry and feels like he's lost his earned birthright to Raymond, who is out of touch with reality and is living in a world all his own, has absolutely no concept of the value of money. He thinks a candy bar and a sports car cost the same thing, about $100. And Charlie at first tries to use Raymond to get the money, but in the process he realizes that he has really come to love his brother. And the love is more important than the money. And they connect in a beautiful way. It's a wonderful story. However, the story is tinged with sadness that it was produced by a seething, lifelong bitterness. Look what Charlie had missed all those years. And I'm not talking about money. And look what Charlie's dad missed. All because of a festering, unresolved bitterness. Don't let that happen to you. Because Jesus said, what do you benefit if you gain the whole world, but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? With every fiber of my being and every bit of ability I have, I'm pleading with you to think about this morning. If there is bitterness in your life, give it up. Give it to God. Let God bring healing. And with God's help, you can get rid of it. And with God's help, you can remove that poisonous root Hebrews 12 talks about from your life. Life is too short for hatred and vengeance and grudges and malice and resentment and self-pity. We don't have to give in to those toxic attitudes. That's one reason why we have the indwelling Spirit within us producing the exact opposite of those attitudes in the fruit of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, meekness, temperance, self-control. We don't have to live that way. With God as our helper, we can choose the way of love and grace and forgiveness and move beyond pettiness and bitterness into a more whole and healthy life. Story I once heard. A woman went to her doctor with constant complaints about her health, and the physician examined her physically and became convinced there was nothing physically wrong with her. And he suspected that her real problem was her negative outlook on life and her bitterness and her resentment. And he suspected that her bitterness was actually doing exactly what Hebrews 12 says it'll do: poisoning her soul and eating away at her from the inside. Every day for her was a woe is me party. Another day to nurse her grievances, to feel sorry for herself and become more and more angry over how, in her mind, she had been mistreated by all the people in her life and by life in general. So the physician took her into a back room in his office where he kept some of his medicine there, and he had shelves full of bottles, and he pulled 2 bottles down, and one of them was full and one of them was empty. And he said, "See these bottles? Notice that these are all empty. They are shaped differently from one another, but they are basically all alike. More importantly, they have nothing in them. I can take one of these empty bottles and fill it with poison, enough poison to kill a human being. Or I can take the same bottle and fill it with enough medicine to bring down a fever and ease a throbbing headache or fight bacteria in the body. I make the choice. I can fill it with whatever I like. I can fill it with poison that will hurt or with medicine that will heal. And then he looked the woman straight in the eye and he said, each day that God gives us is basically just like one of these empty bottles. We can choose to fill it with love and life-affirming and spiritual thoughts and attitudes that lift us up and lift other people up, or we can fill it with destructive, poisonous, bitter thoughts that pull us and everybody else we meet down. The choice is ours. And it is. Every single day. I want to challenge you during this season of the year to determine you are not going to be like this world that is poisoning us, at least as far as it relates to bitterness. Gouge it out, throw it away, cut it off. Get rid of bitterness. And then, the second and last thing I want to mention, because again it's so prevalent, is give up improper judgment. You can't give up all judgments. Nobody can do that. Give up improper judgments. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus warned us about this. He said, do not judge others and you will not be judged, for you will be treated as you treat others. The standard you use in judging is the standard by which you will be judged. This is not a suggestion. This is not a request. This is not a plea. This is a strong command by Jesus, an emphatic order. He is speaking straight from the shoulder here. He's not mincing words or beating around the bush. He's coming on strong and saying, do not judge. Now, obviously, Jesus knows how we have to make some judgments, make some decisions. He's the same one, by the way, in the same sermon, on the Sermon on the Mount, saying, by their fruits you will know them. So you can be a fruit inspector to a degree that you can tell and judge what a person is doing. We make hundreds of judgments every day when we decide to get up rather than stay in bed, when we decide to stay at home rather than go to church, when we opt to buy this or that. We are making judgments. We have to make value judgments and moral judgments too. In fact, Jesus gave this whole Sermon on the Mount so that we might have some insights and standards by which to make Christian decisions, Christian distinctions. Common sense tells us we have to make those kinds of judgments constantly. But of course, those judgments are not what Jesus is talking about here in Matthew 7:1-2. If you look in the dictionary, you will find that the verb used here, the verb judge, does indeed mean to decide, or to distinguish. But it also has another definition. It also means to condemn or to censure. That's what Jesus is talking about here. In fact, this verse could very well be properly in its original language translated as, condemn not, so that you will not be condemned. Our Lord gives us a strong and forceful warning here. Judge not. Don't be unnecessarily hard on people. Don't be so quick to criticize or censure other people. Don't be so arrogantly self-righteous. Don't be so anxious to point the finger of guilt at somebody else. Be gracious. Be kind. Condemn not. Jesus' command, judge not, is a warning against making hasty, condemning judgments on the basis of rumor or hearsay or what you've read that has not been verified or proven accurate. So for one thing, it's a judgment against gossip, which is, one of the best definitions of gossip I've ever heard? It is the stuff heartaches are made of. Because it is. How often do we injure people when we start or repeat a rumor or make a judgment without checking all the facts? When I was a kid, I learned this phrase like most all of you did as well. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That is one of Satan's biggest lies. More accurate, more true is sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can break my heart. Oh my, the stories I've heard in 50 years of ministry with words that have broken somebody's heart. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words can break my self-esteem or my mental health or my confidence or my social life or my well-being or my spiritual life, I would add to that, because I've seen that many times too. Words can rip us apart and knock the very life out of us. The pain we can cause, the hurt we can do with sharp, piercing, stinging words is absolutely indescribable. So before we make our estimate or our judgment of any event or person, we need to wait. Wait out the facts. Wait on the truth. Wait on time. How often we make the mistake of jumping to conclusions very quickly. When I was growing up, the best way I know to illustrate this is some of you who are my age or close to it or older than me, remember those old Western movies and TV shows where a stranger would come to town and something bad would happen in the town, and immediately everybody would point the finger at the new stranger in town as the likely culprit, right? And the stranger would be arrested and put in jail to await a trial when the traveling judge would come next week or next month from Dodge City, and while he was there, a posse would gather of the local citizens who wanted to immediately make a judgment on him and hang him themselves. They'd become a lynch mob and march to the jail and demand that the sheriff hand over the stranger so they could practice immediate and swift justice. But the sheriff and the deputy would stand there by themselves on the porch with their guns drawn, holding off the angry mob of people, saying, you can't take justice into your own hands. We'll wait. The judge will be here in just a few days. Go on home. Disperse yourselves. And a few days later, the judge would arrive, and when the full truth would come out, the stranger would be proven innocent every single time. And the point would be made. It's a dangerous thing to rush to judgment without all the facts. It's a dangerous thing to jump to conclusions without all the information. It's a dangerous thing to make quick, hasty, condemning judgments based on rumor or on hearsay. Before I moved here, what seems like a lifetime ago, when I was preaching in McMinnville, Tennessee, I often spoke, in fact, I spoke about once every quarter at the Rotary Club, Rotary International. And the Rotary Club has a 4-way test. And at least back when I was going and speaking at their meetings, they repeated these questions in every meeting. Of the things that we think or say or do, first, ask yourself, is it the truth? Second, is it fair to all concerned? Third, will it build goodwill and better friendships? Fourth, will it be beneficial to all concerned? And if you can't answer these 4 questions with a firm yes, then don't say it. Don't say it. Give up unfair and unnecessary judgments, because for one thing, they may boomerang back at you. Our harsh judgments have a way of doing that. What we send out comes back. We see that over and over again in the scriptures, don't we? The older brother of the prodigal son judges his prodigal brother harshly when he returns home. And the older brother is the one left outside the party, not getting to eat the fatted calf, upsetting his father, upsetting all his friends and the rest of his family, and missing the party. And why? Because he had bitterness and unfair judgment. That's why. Or I think about Martha judging her sister Mary harshly, because Martha is running around making the meal for Jesus when they are hosting him in their home just a few miles outside the city in Bethany. And Martha is doing all this, getting the dishes ready and the meal and everything else. And Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus, listening to his every word. And Martha's upset. She said, Jesus, make Mary help me. Don't you want to eat? And Jesus said, no, she's eating the best meal there is. She's eating my words, the best meal there can possibly be. And Martha, you are the one who is distracted and upset by many things. You, Martha, are the one who needs to change. That's the way it works, isn't it? Our harsh judgments often boomerang back on us. Thus the prayer, Lord, make my words sweet and tender today, for I may have to eat them tomorrow. I'm going to close by telling you a true story. In his book, Look at the Burning Bushes, Bob Goodrich tells about a schoolmaster some years ago who demanded strict discipline in his classroom. That's okay. We need some of that. I get that. I wish we had a little more of it today. But he required that all the students hold their textbooks in their left hand as they stood to read. Anytime they stood to read, they had to hold their textbooks in their left hand. They had to follow a certain form and then read. Early in the school year, one young boy stood holding his book in his right hand, and the teacher interrupted him with a stern reminder, said he should hold his textbook in his left hand. But the student continued with his right hand, and the teacher exploded at him and said, you take that book in your left hand right now, or you will suffer the consequences. And the boy said, but sir, I can't. And the teacher was so infuriated, he ran to the student, screaming at him at the top of his voice, don't you dare disobey me. And then he grabbed the boy and began to shake him and push him down harshly onto his desk. And just then an empty sleeve swung into view. The boy had no left arm, just an empty sleeve. And the teacher was humiliated and stammered out an apology. Two important lessons emerged from that story. First, everybody has an empty sleeve that we cannot see. Just because you cannot see the empty sleeve in the person sitting next to you or behind you or in front of you does not mean they don't have one. I can tell you from more than 50 years of working with people, everybody does. Everybody has their stuff. And if we knew about it, we would be more understanding and less critical. We would be more understanding and less bitter and less judgmental. We need to be more sensitive to the empty sleeves hidden away in the lives of people. And the second important lesson that comes from that true story is our hard, condemning judgments boomerang right back at us, come right back to haunt us. They reveal far, far more about us than they reveal about the person we've been judging. When Jesus says, do not judge, he is reminding us that judgment belongs to God and not to us. Every now and then somebody will ask me to make a judgment about somebody. Should they be in the church or should they not? I say, I am in sales, not administration. I am perfectly happy for God to be the judge. I'm in sales. Judgment belongs to God, and thank God for that. It means that ultimately we are to be judged not by other people and their imperfections, but by the one who understands us and knows us and loves us best, by the one who knows the whole truth about us, by the one who knows all the empty sleeves in our lives. If we could somehow, by the grace of God, give up bitterness and give up unfair judgments, I am convinced we could heal our souls. We could heal our spirits. I'm even convinced we could heal our nation from this crushing hatred and division that ultimately will take us down, because it was Jesus who said it before Abraham Lincoln said it. A house divided against itself cannot stand.